this is being recorded, and we'll share the recording in the Slack channel. So I'm going to share my screen. One of my as we came out of lockdown, I kind of started making a mental note of some of the things I would never do again in my life after lockdown, and one of them was to use PowerPoint. So thanks to my colleagues, I've been introduced to a very cool little tool called Picto, I think it's called Pictogram or Picto something. So I've done a little handout for you guys, which I'm going to try and share. And I have got a lot of other things that I can share that I'll be referring to, but I didn't want to do a lot of slides. So here is my little picture chart, it's called. And I wanted to share an approach. It's a general approach, but this was a kind of game changer in our business. It was a few years ago. And we were in a space, we had a great business, we had subscribers, all individual subscribers. They were communication professionals in large global corporations. And we had an events and training business that was doing okay. And we had a kind of an ambitious plan to shift our business model from a subscriptions model into an enterprise membership model. And part of the reason we were successful in scaling that offering was this strategy. And it's very, very simple. And it's called the connected customer strategy. It's not new. It's actually from two professors at Wharton. And they wrote a book called Connected Strategy. But I just think it's so super simple. And it's really around this deep connection that you need to get with your customers. And it's only when you actually start to meet their fundamental needs that they will accept that deep connection. It's like a virtuous circle of the deeper you get, the more they understand you, the more you understand them, and then therefore, you know, they'll open up more for you, and you know, the conversation gets richer and richer and richer. And I know that you know, when I talk to a lot of you around customer, you know, let's get some more customer data in our businesses. How do we do that? How do we start listening? So many publishers and information people tend to approach this issue through the lens of their products, right? We like thinking about ourselves as publishers of information, as events producers. We like our formats. We understand our formats. You know, we have customer groups who subscribe to formats. And why I like this approach is that it really just frees you from all that stuff. And you start to have a really direct conversation with your customer. And I think, you know, it's only when you can free yourselves of the lens of, I'm a publisher, I produce products that you buy, do you like them, that you can start to really think about them as customers. Does that make sense? I think it's just it's a very simple idea. It's slightly uncomfortable sometimes to think about it in this way, because we take comfort from the fact that we have products that we, you know, that's our reason for existing, that we produce products for our subscribers or our members or our customers. But gaining the right to have that deeper conversation, I believe, is kind of key to going up the value chain. And there's so much interest amongst this group about, you know, getting into memberships, you know, going up the value chain, being able to shift into that kind of more deeper sort of enterprise kind of relationship. And that's where my colleagues, you know, we like that. And the new business that we set up is following that deeper connection model of, you know, coming up with new ideas and then testing them out with our customers, and then we go back and then we you know, incrementally make changes. But it's that direct conversation that we have. So I think a lot of you will be familiar with this kind of understanding pain and gain, but I think when you're looking at this deeper connection and freeing yourselves from those you know, the formats that I was talking about before, fundamental to this is really understanding what your customers' pain points are. And I know during COVID, it's a really very interesting time with people. I mean, some people I talk to, you know, this is a great time for their business. Some people are suffering terribly and having to pivot into all kinds of new areas. But what is true for everyone is that there is fundamental change going on. So this is a perfect time to kind of pull up and really try and start to understand what your customers' pain points are. I mean, and when I think about this, it's not just what information can we supply that would help you. It's really looking at, you know, what's making them lose sleep at night. What's keeping up them and their teams or their CEO? You know, what's on their mind? What's really worrying them about this situation? I love going into risks as well, because if you kind of try and get into business risk as well, you unearth some really, really fantastic data. So, you know, when I think about risk, I want to think about what's their financial risk, what technology is doing to their markets, you know, what's their reputational risk, what's the risk when it comes to their customer base. You know, what are they having difficulty getting done right now? You know, what are things that they're finding tough or time consuming, or you know, they don't have the skills to actually get things done on their team. I love asking people about competition. You know, where are your competitors falling short? Are there gaps that you can fill? And just generally, do they need help to figure out this new business environment? I know that, you know, my team, when COVID hit, you know, we were, you know, our first reaction was to really get very close to our existing members. You know, we were a startup. We had, you know, a very cherished group of founding members that we just said, right, we just got to really get close to them and really understand what they need. You know, new business has been tough, but actually doing that helped us renew, you know, the majority of the relationships that we had already. But what we did was we said, look, we can just come up with something that will help you plan how you need to you know, help your customers get out of this situation. And we came up with a little new product that really, you know, really helped to open up some new business, but also just helped really figure out what they needed right now. So you take the pain, i.e. the painkiller on the side, and say, you know, what are those things what are those real challenges, those deep challenges that they're facing, and map those out. And again, if I was doing this with a company, this would be a whole day of discussion and you know, customer interviews and interviewing other stakeholders in order to kind of gather this kind of data. But the other question we need to ask is, what would people be willing to pay for in order to alleviate the pain? You know, what's the painkiller that you can offer them to alleviate the pain? And again, I like to think about this as three things: saving time, saving money, saving effort. You know, how can we avoid them going up a very steep learning curve? How can we lower their costs? How can we improve their service? What would be a big relief for them right now if we could come up with a solution? What other offerings delight your customers, and why? What's out there in the market that's new that you think is great and we could learn from? But I think the one of the biggest questions that you can ask, and I recently did a workshop with an events company, and you know, as we all know, events people are really, really hurting, and they really wanted to find out, you know, some new how can they figure out some new revenue streams from the verticals that they were serving in terms of their events business. And they were interested in setting up a research business, and I said, look, they were nervous, it was a big leap, you know, how are we going to do this? And I said, look, just go out and do some interviews. And the question that I would ask people is to say, you know, what would you pay if I gave you $100,000? Where would you put that money right now? Where would you invest it for a solution to your challenges? And that question just opens up so many fantastic opportunities. And it was so pleasing to hear this guy came back and he goes, I commissioned a report that, you know, we're making, you know, sponsorship revenue out of. And it was like, great, you know. So, you know, again, that question is nothing to do with your existing products, but it really makes people think, okay, you know, where's the big game changer that me and my group need? Another great question I like asking people is just, what's on your desk right now? You know, what are you actually actively working on? And that's a big reveal in terms of the projects that they're working on. They might be writing a proposal for something. I'm writing a presentation for my CEO. You know, what are you actually working on? Because often survey questions just don't uncover those kind of projects. I'm actually, because I'm showing my screen, I can't really see the chat. So I'm just going to try and come out of that for a second and just go back into my chat so I feel Can I see the chat? Does that all make sense to everyone? Can everyone? Yeah. Oh, great. There's lots of chat. Fantastic. Okay. Okay. Any questions so far on that? Am I making sense? Is this what you wanted from me?
It's
Everyone's
great.
stunned.
It's great.
Tori's raising. Okay, great. Okay.
We're in shock, Victoria.
So I hope in a good way. It's like, oh, heart attack. Okay, so I know that, you know, a strategy like this feels a bit radical for people. It's sort of quite loosey-goosey. It feels a bit sort of, whoa, that feels well out of my comfort zone. And, you know, when we think about customer voice, you know, most people feel comfortable doing a bit of survey data, maybe some customer interviews. You sit there with your data and you figure out, you know, what you're going to do with it. But one of the things that Stephanie asked me to do today was kind of really think about how you develop this on your team, because I know so many companies, you know, we get quite siloed. You know, the people who talk to customers tend to be, you know, salespeople or, you know, editorial, you know, the content team, the events team, the producers. And what we did at Mellor was we said, you know, a great strategy like this connected customer strategy is just 10% success, right? 90% of your success is how you encourage the culture of your business to kind of be customer orientated or think customer first. And that's the tough stuff. I mean, I can show you this slide and think, okay, this is the strategy we're going to follow, but how do you kind of ingrain it in your day to day? And I think, you know, there's a lot of heavy lifting here, but you know, the things that we did, I'm just sort of reflecting here, and things I think do make a difference is obviously leadership from the top. I was passionate about this. I would always say in any instance, if we're unsure of something, you know, what do our subscribers think? You know, what do we do about this? And you know, there's a little lighthouse on that chart that I put up. And you know, one of the things I love more than anything else is kind of identifying customers who are very into working with you and forming partnerships with them to really understand, you know, if you and you know who they are, you know who your enthusiastic customers are, they're kind of willing to, you know, give and take. They're willing to, you know, work with you on beta products. They test things out for you. They're the partners that you want. But identifying who those people are and kind of building the stories in your business around how that works is fundamental, I think. And we've always, you know, we've always taken that approach. So at Kademy, you know, we were starting from scratch. We were a startup. We had nothing, and we have built, you know, a founding membership group based on this principle. You know, we're like that. We want to understand what your needs are. Here's some stuff. We've built this stuff. What do you think of it? What do you want next? You know, we can build you a tool that does that. You know, we've just done this over the last year with a new group of customers, and it's just fantastic. So, but I think the piece of advice, you know, when you have that customer voice, is that it becomes the kind of currency of your business. I would say that, you know, when you're in a meeting, any meeting, we would always expect people to come to a meeting with customer voice. And I would expect that of any kind of job role, you know, salespeople, account managers, research people, editors, you know, operations people, people who are putting on events. I would expect them to come to a meeting and offer rich conversation around insights from customers, you know, what we've learned, what they like, what they don't like. And at a deeper level, in a business like ours, where we did have deeper, higher value relationships, we would go line by line, talking about each relationship, you know, what we've learned about them, who's who in that relationship, obviously driven by great CRM data, but it's that kind of human touch on that and how we discuss things and the decisions we made off the back of that data that really leads to that kind of innovation. And the other thing I think is really important to understand about this stuff is it's not just about taking the data literally. You know, you can sit there and with a lot of customer data from surveys and take it at face value. I'm getting quite a lot of background noise. If
Hey,
someone,
Molly,
can
Katie,
someone just put themselves on mute?
that
I think it's Katie, Victoria. If you click participants, you can mute her too. Oh, no, she did. Okay.
Okay.
But if that happens again.
That's fine. Everyone's gone.
But I think everybody is muted now.
Okay. So I think part of the skill set of really developing this deep understanding and working with customers is some softer skills around really interpreting what customers are telling you. And I think weak signals, this concept of, weak signals, i.e., having the ability to spot trends that don't necessarily seem obvious, but actually become very fundamental trends, is a real skill. And I think we train people to really think about pushing back on customers as well. If they, sometimes, they would ask us to do things for them that actually weren't the right solution. And it was up to us to kind of kick back and say, through that kind of root cause analysis, to say, is that really what you want? What's driving that question? Why is that important? And being able to kind of look at all of these bits of data that were coming our way and triage them through our lens of saying, okay, is this a good idea? Is it a sustainable solution? Is it scalable across our membership? Because obviously we were working with that kind of shared cost membership model, like a subscriber model. So we would have to, interpret the data that was coming our way and make decisions like that. But I am a great believer in these weak signals, that somebody has to have that radar in your business to say, I'm hearing that. I hear it over here. I hear it over here. What is that? Why is that important? Is that something that can be a big trend for us? So I think obviously data CRM drives a lot of this, but a lot of it is driven by smart humans who are curious and who have that customer first mindset, and are have that bravery about them to say, I'm just going to go and ask some questions. And I think I talk to so many people and they're like, well, I don't know as much as my customers do. And I was like, well, don't worry about that. Just come up with some good questions and that will open up the conversation. Okay, so I'm kind of done with my approach, and I'm really curious to hear, what are your challenges around customer voice? What would you want to kind of open up and talk about? So David says, I've muted, my partner is doing a Zoom theatre workshop upstairs and she's screaming at the scene. That's fantastic. Okay, so Alex Henschel, who's my colleague and who's really the root behind this Kademy offering, which I haven't really talked about very much. And I think, Alex, do you want to come in and just talk about what we're doing at Kademy a little bit more? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but you love me doing that. That's
Alex, yeah, I love being put on the spot. Yeah, I think it's always been, like you said, it's been something that's been at the heart of Kademy since day one. I think it's even though it's been there since day one, it's still incredibly difficult to hold yourself to account operating in that way. I think as specialist information providers, whatever information that is, I think there is a tendency to think, well, we know exactly what we're talking about. People want to come to us. And I think there's a level of humility that you have to have when you're taking this approach to being customer led, that you might not know it all, and that's really uncomfortable some of the time. And it's also okay. Like, people don't always expect you to have all the answers. You do obviously need to be confident about what you're talking about and have value to add. But I think being able to ask really great questions of people and just help them explore things in the moment like that. Like, I've learned so much about that from myself, from doing it, but also from our coaches, from Jerry, from Justine, who's also on the call. And just that it's a really different way of working, but it's really interesting, and it teaches you a lot as well, I think, just as a person, working in that way and just understanding and just getting curious about, why certain things happen and why people are doing things the way they're doing, and what their blocks are, to your point earlier. The thing that I put in the chat was just about how, and actually I'm an introvert, like through and through. And I used to be just terrified about talking to these people who are in really senior positions, who are, you know, experts on what they do. And I had this realization, and it was actually at Mellor, and it was someone who told me, they were like, you know what, they're just people. And yes, they're very smart people, and yes, they're very qualified and senior and all the rest of it, but they're just people. And actually, when you start talking to them, which is what I put, they're often just glad to have someone who's, you know, kind of a neutral third party who isn't part of their organization, who they can just offload to, and who can, maybe they'll take one thing out of the conversation, but especially during COVID, having the space to just talk and have that kind of safe space has just been valuable in itself for them as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Alex. I mean, some great stuff coming up in the chat. I mean, Stephanie's great. The classic thing was when the customer comes to you and says, you know, can you build us an app? And you think, oh, great. You know, but why? Why do you want us to build us an app? And I think, you know, it's that ability to really sort of really unearth, you know, what's the real driver here? What is it? And it could turn into something very different off the basis of that, what I call that root cause analysis, the 5 whys to get to that kind of, you know, well, it might be that they want a very different solution. So Elizabeth is asking, what's the best way to collect and memorialize all of this data we gather? And I think you know, there is that danger of just being inundated with data and actually not having any kind of real, you know, just that it loses meaning very easily. And I think I would always, what I like doing is looking at data by customer, and what we did we used to just run quite intense conversations about trends. And there were 2 things we did. One was obviously going through line by line about, you know, what people wanted, but then we had a process which was like you know, the ideas went into the ideas hopper, and these ideas were kind of competing for resources to build them, or to, you know, to actually put resource into, you know, building a decision-making tool or a data set. You know, we had a lot of sort of, you know, data tools in our business. We would do research as well, but actually one of the things that we liked doing was sort of moving away from those kind of editorial products and making things into things that people used in their workflow. So we had a real tension in the business around looking at what people wanted and whether those ideas would make it onto the kind of new product development list, or the product enhancements that we would build off the back of that data. And that's a good thing. You know, we had this competition going on, what's rising to the top, what's rising to the bottom. And it was that kind of constant conversation. We'd have a regular meeting about that. I don't know. I mean, it really depends on the scale of your business, but in our business, we were talking about 150 corporate members. So it's kind of fairly manageable to keep it at that kind of meeting level. You know, if there's, but we did have a CRM built for us, which had a lot of this data in it. So Alex, help me remember, you know, we had downloads, what they were downloading from our website. We had clicks. You know, we would collect a pretty good picture of what they were using our product for, even before we started talking to them about this stuff. But I think, you know, we would be looking at it from that kind of human relationship perspective, rather than building big data models out of what we were finding. But it is about that expectation of a very cross-functional group coming together and having a discussion about these things. Oh, can I open this up to, yeah.
Sorry, there was a real difference there between like quant data and the more qualitative stuff. And I think the quant stuff is relatively easy to gather and share and you know, analyze essentially. But the qualitative stuff is the trickier thing to do at scale, I think. And like you said, at Mellor and certainly at Kademy, you know, we're small enough that we all know, you know, we're talking to our members every week essentially. And so it's easy for us to do that because we have those relationships and we're small enough to do that. So I think it would be challenging to do that at scale. And you would be reliant on people maybe being a bit more proactive about educating themselves on, you know, on each member, or at least before they have a meeting or a presentation or whatever, so that they were up to date with that. But
yeah,
I think the scale is interesting.
At scale, we would do, you know, quantitative data gathering, and we would use that to gather initial data, and then we'd, you know, refine it through, you know, talking to them. So I think I like to do that two-step process of saying, okay, well, let's identify what the challenges are, and then we'll ask you, you know, then we'll refine that, and then we'll go back to you and have a conversation about it. Maybe ask you to rank 5 ideas that we get from you. Let's discuss why those are important. So it's about, you know, getting that sort of broader reach of data through surveys or data gathering, and then using the you know, that short list of things that come up, and use that to lead the conversations. Matthew, okay, can I open up? Somebody's making a great point.
Mine was more anecdotal. Can anyone hear me? Am I on?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things we did over the past 2 years, starting, I want to say in April, it was like in November of 2018, but we tried it out at a conference. We simply held a breakfast, and that was actually a little too pricey. We found that to be a bit of a waste of time doing it at a conference. But if we talk to the people running the association of our key personas, we were able to really get them to bring us people who may or may not be currently using our information and services. So the reason why that was important was because we found repeatedly that people who are certainly not subscribing, but also just registering on our site, were not using our materials for reasons, for real concrete reasons. So if you were a university professor, you often weren't using it because they didn't have access to a site license. So they were simply using it through EBSCO and getting information through EBSCO, which was a truncated version of what our offerings really were. They didn't really know that there were other significant content, like the research that we were doing, actual papers that were of value to the work that they did. So what we did is we had taken the personas we built, and we worked through the PIOs at all of these different associations. I did, and I connected with them, and I said, we really just want to gather them together. So while it was anecdotal, which is a bit of a concern for me sharing it here, because obviously it's anecdotal and you're not really self-selecting, we were getting good quality conversations going with people who may or may not have been regular utilizers of our content. The reason why that was important is we were able to we would bring in a journalist or an editor to listen to what they were saying, bring it back to their teams, and consider how they could evolve the content they were creating to better align with the information we were learning on site. And by doing it as a happy hour, it's not as expensive, by the way, just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, isn't it? And I think, you know, you can have a lot of worries about, is this the right group? You know, are they the right people? Is what they're saying significant? But actually just starting that process is really important. And I also think, one of the things I did recently for a different company, you know, sometimes I'm involved with a few different businesses now, is I did some customer interviews for a team as a third party, okay? And it was really interesting because the clients and the subscribers really opened up to me in a way that they wouldn't do to your team, because they're obviously afraid of, you know, maybe, you know, they want to be sensitive to the fact that, you know, you're working really hard providing this great information for me. And so I would really recommend, if you do have somebody who can do customer interviews as a third party and really delve into the whole market, like do the kind of SWOT analysis, you know, let's look at your market, let's look at how you perceive Kademy as opposed to the other people in the market. What are their strengths and weaknesses? I think that is incredibly powerful, but, you know, get somebody outside the business to do that.
That's a great idea. I would highly recommend that, because I did feel sometimes people were saying, when there's an editor or a journalist in the room, they are thinking, oh, maybe they'll circle back with me. And we always left that open as a possibility. So I will say that the general sense is that the results have been good, because what it did is it also created a network of subject matter experts that we were able to go back to, saying, thanks so much for coming to this. We're thinking about a webinar on this. Now we want to create a new piece of content. And we've met you and we know that this is of interest, and we could bring these people in as resources for other work we might do.
Yeah. And, you know, once you've got that network set up, Matthew, it's so true that people start coming to you with great ideas. And I think that's one of the kind of signs of, it's like, I've really made this happen and made it work, is that your customers coming to you saying, hey, you know, we've got this challenge. We thought you might like to work on it with us. And your part of you thinks, but actually we did that with, you know, one of the first ever training programs we did, somebody came to us saying, look, we need a new curriculum. Would you just write it for us? And we were like, oh gosh, you know, but actually that turned into a multi-million-pound business. It was great. So it's that, through that kind of intervention, that people start coming to you, and they know that you have the wherewithal to do that work. And that's where, you know, you just get that, it's not just incremental growth, you get those kind of breakthrough products. Okay, so Suzanne's asking, how do you find a legit role for everyone in the company, not just those who are extroverts or like people who are not shy and quiet? Please share different types of roles and contributions to what we at EB Medicine call our customer voice initiative. Okay. I think one of my company's values and my values and what I come to the table with, I think we're quite a challenging group of people. Justine might think that. But one of our strengths, I think, is that we do challenge our customers to kind of be better and improve and think differently. And so I tend to, I mean, I'm actually not an extrovert either. So I think, you know, I'm quite an introverted person, but I do have a challenging analytical mind. So I think it's really about saying, it's really about asking people to question things sometimes that that don't necessarily make sense. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're extroverted or introverted. I think it's just that mindset of saying, is that true? Or that curiosity. I think I like people who are curious and challenging. I think that's what I've always built in my business, to say, you know, the curiosity. I mean, not all journalists are curious, but you know, it's that sort of, let's really think hard about this in an analytical way. And as I say, those weak signals, I'd expect people to be able to kind of pick up weak signals from all different aspects of their work and lives, you know, and come to work with bringing those weak signals and that kind of, do you think that might be important? Let's look at that, you know, that kind of approach as well. And that could come from introverts as well as extroverts.
Victoria, I think
but
one of the
go ahead, because I'm interested.
I was going to say, I think one of the, Suzanne and I work together, so I can guess at what she's getting at. I think one of the challenges that we run into sometimes is for people that are like, the thought of talking to a customer is terrifying to me, or they're busy and I don't want to bother them, and and I shouldn't do that. So what I'm kind of reading between the lines of you saying is there's other ways to bring that customer voice into the conversation without necessarily having a direct conversation. So like looking at what, so I guess if you could elaborate more on what you would suggest, what's a non-talking to a customer way to hear their voice?
Yeah, I mean, you know, in non-COVID times, you know, we would, when we were really getting into this strategy, we would hit the road. I mean, we wanted to go and see what people did, you know, and so listening isn't just about data or interviews. It's actually just about standing there and watching people do their jobs. And kind of, you know, I'd love going to see people in their offices, because I'm like, what's on your bookshelf? Oh, what's that binder got in it? Oh, that's interesting. You know, it's actually the observation of their jobs and understanding what they do, right? Those pain points. You know, if you do that process, and actually I'll put these resources up later, but there's a great company called Strategizer, and they do this book here, which I really love. It's called Value Proposition Design. And on the flip side, it says bad value proposition design. So don't start from that end of the book, start from this end of the book. But they have a really nice process, which is about observing customers and mapping out that pain and gain. And I think a lot of it is about trying to observe it. I know that's really challenging right now, but it might be that it might be right for your customers that you could go and watch them, or you know, hold focus groups in their places of work. I know that's tricky right now, and you know, but we would really encourage. I really wanted to understand what their workflow was in terms of the whole year. Like, what does your year look like? What are the tasks in your year? What are the things that you need to complete? How can we help insert ourselves into that workflow? And that might have been, you know, understanding when their budget cycle starts, when their planning cycle starts, and you know, mapping out the kind of service and subscription around that to help them do that. So I think it depends on what the job role of your subscribers is, but I think you know, observation and understanding is part of that. It's not just about being, you know, interviewing people over the phone or on Zoom. But I mean, you know, we have done, you know, I mean, Alex, you know, Alex was very brave and came on the call and said, I'm an introvert, I used to hate doing this. But, you know, Alex and I did those interviews together, and Alex listened and I led. And that was a great partnership, right? And you wrote up the notes. Thank you for that. But, you know, she took a lot away from those conversations, and I led the, you know, we led the interview. So between us, we've got very different skill sets, and that was a great partnership. And actually those interviews were incredibly important because we were reaching out to customers during the COVID pandemic. They were completely overwhelmed, our customers. And by being useful and saying, how can we be useful to you? How can we understand what your challenges are? You know, otherwise we could have been silent. We could have said, they're really busy right now, let's just let them get on with it. But actually we didn't. We reached out to people, and as a result of that, we, you know, we put on some round tables. We've got some really good conversations going. We've put together some resources. But, you know, Alex and I made a good partnership. Alex did the listening, I did the talking. You know, that worked. Okay, I'm going to go back to the chat. Any more points or lessons? Tori, I'm going to pick on Tori. Why don't you come up and share your point? Hey.
Well, first of all, this is just a dream conversation. So Victoria, thank you so much. This is amazing. The point I was just trying to make, or was suggesting, was that sometimes, and maybe it's just me, but you get kind of in this groove that says, oh, I'm going to talk to everybody. I'm going to learn everything I can learn. And you go out and you start doing interviews, and you're kind of doing them, you know, whether it's a listening tour, whether it's on Zoom, whatever you're doing. And it just becomes like boom, 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 boom. And there's no time to reflect and learn and make it better. At least that's, I'm sort of admitting my weaknesses. So that's something that I learned was really important, was sort of to stop. And, you know, obviously it wasn't just me, it was a lot of people making these things, and to sort of group internally and sort of like, what did we learn? Like, were there certain questions that put up barriers so people stopped talking, or perhaps were just open? Were there others that people, you know, were really engaged with? Do we think we were hearing the truth? You know, sometimes the truth isn't the truth. And, you know, how did we get to that truth? You know, the concept of like, and I don't know, but it seems like a lot of people are able to answer the question, what's keeping me up at night? But the question, I think, Victoria, what you said was so great, was, what are you working on now? I mean, I sort of have the list that I'm doing for my strategic plan. I mean, it's September, holy moly, I better get it done for the year. But then I have the stuff I'm actually working on.
Yeah.
So I think those are really important distinctions. And I think, I guess my last point, I think having done some of these too, it's is kind of taking people where they are. And so taking 100% of the cue from the person you're with. So, and helping guide them to help you, if that makes sense. Because they really, if they're meeting with you, they want to help you. Because well, theoretically, they're buying something from you because you are helping them. And anyway, so I found that that's an important thing. Some people are slow thinkers. Some people are fast thinkers. Some people are fast thinkers that come back around. So it's sort of being adaptable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And actually being useful. I think I've got another concept that I talk about in these sessions, which is around like accessing the left and right sides of a customer's brain. So, you know, left side is rational. It's like, I buy business information from you and you tick all my boxes. But actually the right, I always think with these relationships that we build, the right side, the emotional side is actually really important too. So, you know, it's about their egos and their aspirations and, you know, the things that you can do to help them advance their careers, or that's equally as important. And that's what makes, you know, that emotional connection that you make with people about being useful. And actually, you know, there are moments, key moments that make a massive difference to their lives that you can be involved in, and they remember that, and that's why they renew. It might be that, you know, okay, you meet all the needs on a sort of rational level, you know, the product's great, the data's good, I can make a business case to buy this, but actually it's the emotional side as well that's really important. And we always took that really seriously at Mellor, because we knew that if we did that, they'd pop up at another business and, you know, and sign up with you as well. Yes, Outside In, Murray, that's a great book. Really, really, really great book. Thanks for that recommendation. Simone Spencer says it's important to involve customer service and salespeople when deciding on product initiatives and new products. Absolutely. I mean, Katie, who is our commercial lead in our business, I mean, you know, she's the first person I ask. I'm like, what are people talking about right now? You know, I love salespeople. I love sales. I would always go on these sales trips with our senior salesperson when we were doing this, and I would be listening to the sales conversations and being in those. I loved going on meetings, and we used to call them, we used to have these kind of marathon trips. I'd fly over from London and we'd get on the cellar and we'd go up and down the East Coast, and I wasn't allowed to eat for 12 hours because we had 15 meetings. But, you know, that's how I learned about the customers that we were recruiting in the US, especially when we were expanding our business into the US. And there's nothing quite like that. So, but customer service, salespeople, you know, designing products, it's not just about, you know, the content. I mean, you know, my team came up with something really smart. We have a coaching product that Justine is leading, and just having a great little Calendly booking app on the site has just kind of made the product really easy to use, because, you know, it doesn't involve the back and forth of scheduling something. They can just go, yep, I want to schedule that. And those kind of insights come from not just your product people, but your, you know, customer service people as well. I love that idea. Heather, do you find success with surveys and feedback forms within the right product, especially in the COVID world right now? Yeah, I mean, one of the things I'll share in the group after this is a form that we used to use for feedback, and it was completely redesigned. So we had a really talented product person called Kelly Parsons, who was incredibly helpful, and she was behind most of this strategy. But she just said, look, the feedback forms, you know, I call them that kind of so what information. So much feedback form or survey produces what I call so what. What does that change? What does that tell us? That kind of so what thing. And so the feedback form really just asked you to kind of, what are your challenges right now? And how do you rank these possible solutions that we have to your challenges? And then at the bottom, there would be that I would pay $100,000 for a solution to X. And that was the form. We had it as a kind of placemat that we put in front of people at meetings, and it was great. And we didn't ask them about, you know, whether they enjoyed the meeting. And of course, that's important. But those are the things we wanted them to actually write down, to say, you know, out of these possible solutions that we've come up with, rank them according to your preferences. But, you know, what are those big breakthrough innovations? Sorry, I think I've just, there we go. My phone was off the hook. My good old fashioned landline is here on my desk, my faithful landline, but I just disconnected it. So yeah, surveys, I like ripping up surveys and just doing something, but, you know, feedback, especially in the COVID world right now, any insights? I haven't done anything specifically around surveys right now. Any insights from the group about how you're kind of doing that right now.
Victoria, it's Elizabeth.
Yeah.
One thing that we're pretty frequently surveying on is, and this is directly related to COVID, but kind of comfort levels about traveling, purchasing, and attending conferences, because it's changed so quickly here. So we try not to beat our customers over the head with a new survey every week, but we try to find different channels to collect this information as quantitatively as possible. So whether it's a survey that we post in one of our email newsletters or askings on social media, but that's been pretty important to us to try to figure out kind of comfort level about spending and traveling and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been doing this. I'm sorry. I was going to say we've been doing the same thing related to COVID, and we've kind of been shifting now to the reopening. And so all of that. What's interesting is that we're seeing, at least, that nobody really knows, but everybody's really interested in what everybody doesn't know, if that makes sense. So I take some solace in knowing I'm not the only one whose company doesn't have a plan for X. And I think that's what's kind of helping. Because of some of the surveys, we've done some interviews, which are quite different than sort of just global survey type stuff. And it's resulted in, we published nearly 400 pieces of content in the last 6 months just on COVID. And that has been remarkable. I mean, our traffic to our site, I mean, the prominence it's given us has been spot on. And why? Because it is 100% customer centric. It's not what we maybe would have done in the past, but it's a direct result of what we learned in these interviews. So anyway, I just wanted to share that because it's kind of remarkable to me. I actually don't believe it. Sometimes I want to go look at the data again because I'm not sure it's accurate, but it seems to be so.
Wow. I mean, that's a great story. But I think it's, I think when I want, I mean, I'm a kind of big picture thinker, and that's why I have to have Alex alongside me, because she's the detail. but I think you can get quite incremental about things, can't you? And I think it's like asking yourself the question, is there something big here that I'm missing? Like I can keep going and make increments, but is there a big game changer that's lurking in this data that I don't know? And I like sort of being able to kind of think in that way. So there's some really great points about lurking in other groups online, about where your customers hang out. I love that. Some Facebook groups, LinkedIn, Reddit, asking people, just because we can get very busy and we kind of forget those things, can't we? That just hang out where your customers hang out and where they're having conversations, and dive right in. Suzanne's asking, what about poll boxes on website homepages, rotating questions and/or blog space for running input on your market? Anyone doing good poll boxes? I know we do upvoting, Alex, don't we? We try and do upvoting to ask people to kind of rank ideas that we have. Anyone else doing interesting things with poll boxes on their website? I think anyone writing a survey or writing a poll, I would always say, just don't forget those great open-ended questions, like my $100,000 question. We like to format surveys and they might give you some data, some useful data, some less useful data, but asking people open-ended questions is the big reveal for me.
We struggle to get people to complete that type of format, just because they're so busy recently. They tend to respond better to that kind of conversational, personal request for feedback than they do something that's kind of sitting on a homepage. Or we've got a poll that sits in our member area that's not super, like it's not that popular. So I think people are just doing, for us anyway, people are kind of doing less browsing or cruising around. They kind of come for very specific things, but that might just be us at the moment.
Yeah, and I often think people don't know where that data's going. If it's not obvious to you how it's going to be used or where it's going, it may not be that appealing. And I think whenever we've done surveys in the past, we used to have a big research business, and we used to do a lot of surveys to kind of fuel that. And I always thought that, you know, we used to reward people for filling out surveys, and the more you reciprocate, the better the uptake of the surveys, and you get yourself into a really nice virtuous cycle there, which I think you shouldn't ignore. That the more people value the fact that you've acted on their data or thanked them or given, you know, some piece of it as a thank you, the more likely they are to respond the next time, and then you start getting a really nice you know, uptick in your response rates. Melissa, we use Crowd Signal, a WordPress plugin. It's been a hit or miss, but it also depends on the question. Yeah, it's true. We found our audience engages more with simple yes or no questions. That's interesting. Yeah.
We're an HR we cater to an HR audience, and I feel like the open-ended questions might not necessarily work for them because of the sensitive nature of some of their work. So we've discovered that yes or no really gets people more engaged.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think and they're easy to answer, right?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah. No, you see, I think that's very smart.
Are they Melissa, are they questions like, have any of your employees been arrested for felonies in the last 5 days? That kind of stuff?
We're actually doing election questions right now. So one of them was yesterday, or last week's question was, have you had any complaints about candidates or employees being too vocal about their favorite candidates? And fortunately, many people said no, there weren't no complaints, but it's prior poll questions haven't performed as well as these have.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, that was more what I was asking about, kind of just as a simple hook or engagement to take temperature across an audience on kind of general sentiments. And certainly the election one that we could talk about here, you know, with our audience being emergency medicine providers and COVID, there's a lot going on clearly related to that. So sometimes it just gives you that little news hook or point of engagement for there to be more interaction or more of a peer feeling associated with your company, a connection to their peers.
Yeah, that's really great. I think maybe there's room for another one of these sessions simply on surveys, and try and get some sharing going on different things, because I think I've come from this obviously from a kind of bigger strategy perspective, but I think there's probably a lot we could be talking about just specifically on surveys and cool tools that we can use, and you know, where people are getting the right responses and that sort of thing. Any other burning questions that you came to this session with that we haven't covered? Raise your hands now.
Victoria, have you had sort of any luck converting survey data into editorial material, either paid or free? Because we use surveys a lot to generate articles, but you know, I did a survey in support of an article a month ago, and as several people have said, I think I had 4 responses. So I managed to create an article out of it, but it was fishy use of anecdotal evidence.
Yeah, I think we're actually, our product is professional development. So what we're doing in our membership is actually just developing virtual courses. So we're not actually we're writing insights and putting content out on social media, and we kind of use that feedback to kind of see whether something's hot or not. But we're using the customer data that we're gathering to build virtual programs at the moment. So they are virtual programs that we're offering, you know, online, which is very cool. You know, we're completely 100% virtual. We can, you know, but so we're not actually generating any straight editorial at the moment. We're just using that intelligence to build what people need from a professional development standpoint. Stephanie, okay. Stephanie wants me to actually launch a poll right now. So polling.
Whenever we're wrapping up, yes.
Yeah, we're wrapping. Okay, well, let's put it up. We have a poll. eating our own dog food here. So I will start wrapping up because we're at the top of the hour. But this is the first one we've done around customer voice. It'd be really great to hear where you want to go next with this, because we're going to make these quite regular. Any deep dives, and I'm going to put up on the innovation section afterwards, I'm going to put up some great questions that you can ask your customers around pain and gain. I'm going to put those up on there, and I'm also going to just put up a few other bits and pieces that I haven't actually managed, because I didn't want to do a lot of PowerPoint, obviously, but there is some PowerPoint there in the background. I haven't managed to completely ban PowerPoint from my life, but I'll put up some useful resources around this whole idea of the connected customer strategy and approaching your product development from understanding those deep pain points and the gain points, just to reiterate. And hopefully you can take some of these things back to your team and help them figure out where to go next. There is a poll, so please just vote. It's anonymous, isn't it, right, Stephanie? So I won't be offended if anyone, I won't know who you are. And use the chat for any other stuff, and let's just carry on the conversation on the Slack group. So that's where we can all connect. We all know each other now, and I'd love to hear some maybe follow-ups or some lessons learned, and maybe we can do some survey sharing, and maybe we can schedule another webinar off the back of that. But you've been great. Thanks for the great questions you've asked, and thank you, Alex. Sorry I put you on the spot, but you've been a superstar. And thanks everyone else. So let's get voting. Oh, sorry, Stephanie, I'm going to hand over to you.
No, I was going to say, I just wanted to thank you so much, Victoria. As I told you before, when I first listened to your customer voice talk years ago, it was incredibly valuable and insightful for us. And I got even more out of today. So thank you for sharing. I think this will be really thought-provoking for a lot of people. And yeah, we want to thank everybody for joining today. This is our network for subscription, membership, and event professionals. So if you're not already in the Slack channel, please join. Please invite others as well. I'll have the recording available next week. I'll send an email out with the link to that, and that will be posted on our Slack channel as well. Also want to encourage everybody to attend our next webinar, which is next Tuesday, the 15th, at our standing time of 11 a.m. Eastern. It's for working parents and managers of working parents. I'm going to pop the link for that into the chat, so you can save that to your calendar, and the link for inviting others to join is in there as well. So please do give us your feedback, continue the conversation on Slack, and thank you guys so much for joining.